Outlaw Law is brought to you by Whitaker and Hamer, attorneys and counselors at law. Your law firm for life.
The Outlaw Lawyers, Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer, your hosts, the managing partners at Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. Offices conveniently located in Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay, Varina, and Gastonia, and they are practicing attorneys here in North Carolina. I'm Morgan Patrick, consumer advocate. Each and every week we get into legalese and other types of discussions, always a lot of fun. We do understand that, look, there are legal situations going on with a lot of our listeners, and if you have a question about what you're currently going through and you need an answer, I've got a phone number for you, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Leave your contact info, briefly what that call's about, and an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch to help answer some of those questions. You can also send your question to the show, questions at theoutlawlawyer.com. That's questions at theoutlawlawyer.com. Gentlemen, we're going to go to the Kavanaugh case.
Well, before we do that, Morgan, I got two things I want to talk about before we get there. One, Joseph, I know you're doing some internet research during our last segment. Can you give me the top 3 movies of all time that featured an elephant?
Well, again, these are subjective things, and so if you look at the rankings, if you look at like the rankings online, you get the top 3 they give you is Dumbo as number 1.
Oh, that's a good. I think that's a good
animated Dumbo. Then they've got Babar, the movie, as number 2. And
Babar. It's Babar.
Yeah, excuse me. I'm not a big fan of Babar.
I wasn't either.
And then you got Tarzan as number 3, which I don't even, is that really even an elephant movie?
I mean, is the elephant the feature role there? I don't think so.
I don't even remember.
My list is not like that. My list doesn't go like that. I think my list goes number 1 for me personally is, you ever seen that? You probably haven't, Josh, because you don't watch movies. The Protector. It was called Tom Young-gung. It was like a Taiwanese movie. It's like an action film.
No,
fantastic. You should check it out. It's got
features an elephant.
It features that he protects an elephant, and if you're into action movies, you'd really like it. And then I'm gonna go Dumbo, number 2, obviously. Yeah. And then I'm gonna go Horton Hears a Who.
Yeah. I think you got a Babar. Those were like the books, like
Babar, but it's Babar.
Babar. Those were the books that were like in the doctor's office that you only read if like every other book was gone, you know?
Yeah, and every time you read them, you're like sick with the flu because you're in the doctor's office, so you end up hating Babar for life.
Nobody like that.
Associate him with feeling like crap.
Well, I felt like you mentioned that during the break, and I felt like that was important enough where we needed to get back to that. But The second thing I wanted to remind everybody is that a lot of times me and Joseph, we like to sidebar. Right. We like to sidebar. That's a nice way of saying it. But we are still real attorneys, right? I feel like we have to convince everybody. Real. Yeah. And I feel like after we talk for like 30 minutes, we have to circle back around and remind everybody that me and Joseph, we're Whitaker and Hamer. And just like Morgan tells you when we come in, we're real attorneys. We're licensed to practice in North Carolina. I hear from some of our listeners. So some of our listeners do, in fact, call us and get legal advice, right? Get a consult, and we've helped a lot of listeners, and that's one of the reasons we do this show, right? We want to hear from our listeners, but I feel like when we're kind of being super silly, sometimes we have to come back in and remind people that we do like to have fun on the show here, but we are real attorneys, competent. I would argue competent real attorneys who can
very competent.
Right.
Have you seen help, the research we do on the fly about elephant movies? Like, come on.
But anyway, a very serious thing to talk about next. We had a whole show where we had Cassandra and Taylor on with us, and we talked about the leak, the Supreme Court abortion leak, right? And that was a very serious thing. We talked about it, and it was very serious for a lot of reasons because it never happened. It's kind of more evidence of how our society's not respecting, traditional norms, right? That was something that would never happen in, generations past. The Supreme Court's kind of a respected institution, and they operate in a certain way. And so we've been seeing the fallout from that leak. There's a lot of it. One, there's a whole story we could talk about how they're going to figure out who leaked it, who's in charge of that. I don't think that's really going real well. We haven't really heard. There's no leads, right, on who may have leaked that. I don't know that we'll ever figure that out. So that's a part of the story. But the other part, it's very easy. I haven't done it, right? But apparently it's very easy to figure out where, public officials live, right? And so right after it got leaked, the justices all had folks like protesting in their neighborhoods, like on their yards. They were getting death threats, things like that are happening. And that's never good, right? That isn't a good thing to happen. That's our public officials our elected officials should be able to do their jobs as they were elected. And certainly everybody has the right to protest and disagree. But I don't know if camping out on their yards because they're doing something you don't like should become the normal thing that happens. But it went even further for Justice Kavanaugh, who was kind of a lightning rod when I don't know that we have to go into the circumstances around that, but when he's getting confirmed, that certainly was a very, what's the word?
Contentious.
Contentious. Yes. Contentious. Anyway, so he's kind of a lightning rod and it wasn't even his opinion that was leaked. The opinion was being written by another justice, but anyway, they found a guy in his neighborhood armed with his address who I guess sounds like, at least from admitted that he was going to go attempt to kill Kavanaugh. And so there was some kind of tip someone gave and he was picked up and charged with attempted murder because he made it very clear this was his intent. And for me, that's, it's just, and then the House and the Senate, I don't know if you saw this, Joe. So that's a crazy situation. That's, a deadly situation for Justice Kavanaugh. He's a Supreme Court justice. He needs to be able to act and perform his public duties, his official duties, in a way where he doesn't think he's going to get murdered tomorrow, right? So the Senate and the House have been trying to pass a bill to get the Supreme Court families some protection. They're not really covered now, and maybe some folks who work for the Supreme Court, like, hey, we're going to have to protect them like we protect the president and other federal officials. And so the Senate and the House have been going back and forth trying to pass this bill, and they haven't agreed, right? They haven't been able to agree that this protection should be offered. And the arguments, I don't know if you saw some of the arguments, Joe, but some of the arguments were a little crazy. There's some Democrats that won't vote for it because they want abortion providers to receive protection in the same bill. So they kind of want to add that on there. And then there's a New Jersey contingent that wants it. There was a terrible story of a federal judge, his family being killed in New Jersey. And so they want the protection to go on down the line to other federal justices. But it's just weird to me to see this play out, but it's not good.
Josh, one thing we always do on this show is we really strive to be nonpartisan, to not take sides, to be very neutral in our approach to things. But I want to go on the record and I want to say that we unequivocally think it is a terrible thing to threaten to kill Supreme Court justices in response to the rulings that they issue. I'm confident in putting that on the record for me.
We're gonna have to spend some time one day going back. I don't know. We've done 50 of these shows, 55, something like that. I think we're gonna have to go back and have someone record everything that we were comfortable, right?
I'm comfortable with
going
that,
on the record.
And I'll extend that. I'll extend that to say I think anybody should be able to perform their job without the fear of being murdered by someone for that job, and giving additional protection to someone, especially like we have a super vested interest as a society for our Supreme Court justices to be able to rule on things and do what they do from the bench without fear of repercussions. Like if it gets to the point where someone can be swayed or fears enough to really impact the way that they issue a ruling, I think it's a terrible, terrible thing for us as a society.
Yeah, it's not good. It's and we're seeing it in different ways, and every generation I think sees it to some extent. So no matter what, we see it. We see different things happen every generation. I think every generation kind of feels like it's going off the rails a little bit. It's not like it was when I grew up. I think you have a lot of that, but I do think we're seeing some signs that's happening, right? And maybe the pendulum always swings, right? So things get a little crazy, and then people get tired of it, and it swings the other way, and there's more law and order, and it's just kind of how it works out. But it was a very disturbing story, and everybody reported on it, and it kind of went away. And the one thing I hate when something like this gets reported, the real important thing is, well, what are we doing about, what are we doing about this? Because that's what happens with some things. Like some things we talk about it in the national news cycle for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then nothing happens. And it's just, anyway. It's neither here nor there. We're not going to solve it on today's show, but it's disconcerting, and it's just definitely something to keep an eye on when things like this pop up in the news.
The Outlaw Lawyers, Josh Whitaker and Joe Hamer. You can find them at Whitaker and Hamer Law Firm. They are the managing partners at the firm. They are practicing attorneys here in North Carolina, and they have offices in Raleigh, Garner, Clayton, Goldsboro, Fuquay-Varina, and Gastonia. We're going to get into a few more topics before we wrap this show up, but if you've got a legal situation you're facing and you have questions, I've got a phone number for you, 800-659-1186. That's 800-659-1186. Leave your contact info, briefly what the call's about, and an attorney with Whitaker and Hamer will be in touch to help you with that question. And you can always send your questions to the program, questions@theoutlawlawyer.com. We're back right after this.